Live and to give you as much as she can in a Facebook Live session about manipulatives and their use. We've had a lot of teachers ask for that and a lot say that they would like some guidance on it. When this video is going, you will be able to type in your questions and things like that. She won't be able to answer them during the session, obviously, like sometimes we can do on Facebook Live, but she will be able to do that this evening when she goes back to visit this recording. So, Ashley, I'm going to turn it over to you.
In our session, we talked about the importance of manipulatives and what manipulatives are. And manipulatives are anything that students can use to help them solve problems. And that also includes virtual manipulatives, drawings, and then the concrete manipulatives. And so we're just going to talk about a few different manipulatives and a couple of games that you can use with your kids that are easy to get started right away. So one of the biggest things that you have to think about with manipulatives is you have to teach students how to use them. You have to teach them how to retrieve them and how to put them back in your classroom. Organization is really key to keeping your math class going smoothly and uninterrupted. So, use that first 20 days of math and go through and look at those different lessons and pull some of those out if you need some help with organization. And the other thing that we kind of take advantage of too sometimes as teachers is when we're familiar with a manipulative, we think that students are, and that's not always the case. So anytime that I introduce a game and it's with a new manipulative, I always create an anchor chart that the kids help me with to explain how it's going to be used and explain the different things about it. So as we go through them, if there's some information that could help you create an anchor chart with your students, I will provide that as well. But we're going to get started with base 10 blocks, and if you are a 2nd through 5th grade teacher, you should certainly have a class set of base 10 blocks in your room. If not, I highly suggest get them, because base 10 blocks can be taught can be used to teach everything from counting all the way up to decimals and percents. So they are, to me, the vital manipulative that I have in my classroom. I use them almost daily, certainly weekly. The first game that I'm going to show you with these is called Build a Flat. And so with this, I organize mine in a Rubbermaid container. We have figured out that these are hard to find now. So I've had a few that have broken, and my grade level also uses these. And so we've been searching everywhere to try to find some new ones and haven't been able to find them. So we're looking for a replacement. And if I can find a replacement, I will certainly spread the word for it. But just something easy to store them in. And I usually... when I present these to the kids, they have, my first rule when they get their base 10 is they have to count and make sure they have enough. In 2nd grade, we build numbers above 100, so we always make sure we have at least 21s and we have at least 10 rods. And that way they can always build numbers up to 100, and then using the 100 flats, they can go beyond. So for build a flat, which is also in the Georgia frameworks. Depending on your level of student, you can use different size dice. I have a 6-sided, a 10-sided, and a 12-sided. I also have 20-sided dice as well. And I'm just going to use a 6-sided, and basically what you do is you roll and you build. And you keep going through that. Once you get to 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, then you have to trade. So you put in the ones and you get out a flat. And so now I have 10 as a 1 10 rod instead of 10 ones. And you continue that until you get a new 10. Make it a little bigger than that. And then 10. So now I have 23. And I would keep going until, I'm going to just kind of skip ahead. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's say I have 94, and I continue to roll until I got 94. And so I'm going to roll till I get one more 10. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And I trade out, and now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rods, which would trade in, to create a 100 flat. This game is also good with subtraction. You can start here and go backwards. So this is a great support for 2nd and 3rd grade students who are learning about addition and subtraction with regrouping without using an algorithm. The algorithm isn't needed. They get the idea of they have to build their ones to create tens and build their tens to create hundreds. And so that's a quick and easy game to play with students. Moving on quickly to the next game. This is a game that I introduced pretty much. This is the first game I introduced to my kids. We talk about a lot of organization at the beginning of the year. I go through the first 20 days with my kids. We learn how to select manipulatives, and we learn how to take care of our manipulatives. The reason I use cards a lot. Cards are cheap. You can get a 2-pack of cards at the Dollar Tree for $1, and they really only need a half a deck. So it's really like 25 cents a kid. So so you don't need to spend a lot of money. And the little boxes that I just found them this year. I've been looking for them forever. So if you find them, grab them because they don't come around very often. But the first game that I play, the first thing I do before I introduce this game to my kids is we talk about the cards. We talk about what a face card is, and we talk about why it's called a face card, and I show them the cards with the faces on them. We talk about what does it mean to have the cards face up or face down, because that might be in some of the directions where they need to have their cards face up, or they might need to make a pile of cards face down. We talk about what a discard pile is. We talk about what a draw pile is. We also talk about the different shapes on the cards. So like for this number, we talk about how for these cards, the shapes below the number are bigger and the ones inside the box are smaller. So this would be the quantity of the card, and inside the box is where they would count to figure out how much the card is worth. And we also talk about why the numbers are upside down, so that the person across the table can see what the number is just as well as you can. And because it's really important to show them the difference between a 6 and a 9, because some kids will argue about this being 6 and this being 9 because it's upside down to them. So we really have to look at that when I introduce cards. There's a lot to do with that. So Find 10 is pretty easy. It's just a way to support kids' understanding of the benchmark number of 10, which is so important to our number system. And so I also show kids how to shuffle. I don't show them this way, But they like to try because I do it in front of them, and so they always want to know, but I always tell them later in the year. But I always show them how to do just a simple shuffle like this. I just saw a joker, so we also talk about jokers. You can't leave that one out. In this game, they're going to flip 5 cards face up, and they're going to look for combinations of 10. I don't ever tell them combinations, I just say look for 10. They will eventually start finding ways to make 10. So when they flip the cards up, we usually do any game I introduce. We usually do a whole group on the floor in a circle. I have some big manipulatives. You can buy really big, like 8.5 by 11 size jumbo playing cards. It's the kids get totally engaged when you pull those out and let them use it. So it's a great way to introduce. So then you look for ways to make 10, and you pull them out and you make a discard pile. And then you continue by stacking cards on top of the previous cards. You cannot use the cards that you can't see. I've always said that jokers are 0, but this year my students decided that they wanted to make jokers wild. So now we say you can either use them as 0 or you can use them as wild. If we used them as a wild, we could say 9 and 1 is 10, or we could say 6 and 4 is 10. And once you uncover a number, then you can use it. So if I had an 8 there, I uncovered the 2. If I had another 8, I could use the 2 then. We also talk about the ace is 1, and I use the reference of the alphabet. A is the first letter of the alphabet, so so ace equals 1. And I leave face cards in. You don't have to, but I leave the face cards in and just tell them those equal 10. So they're kind of like a freebie. And the goal is to get through your entire pile, whether it's a half a deck or a whole deck, and see how many cards you leave at the end. Kids eventually will start looking at numbers and go, oh, 3 and 5 is 8 and 2 more is 10. You don't have to tell them that. They will start figuring out the faster ways. The more they derive and work through the numbers, the faster they want it to happen, and so they start getting really creative. I had a kid this year for the first time in one of my colleagues' classrooms who decided that he wanted to add subtraction to it. So he said, well, I know that 8 and 6 are, 8 and 4 make 12, and he also had a 2, there was a 2 on the board also, and he said, and if I take away 2, then that makes 10. He said, Miss Martin, can I do that? I was like, absolutely, how about it? So they get really creative with their ideas. And as you can see, this is an independent game. I kind of make it a partner game just by having them play on their own, and then they have a partner that they check to see how many cards they have left. And just because kids like to win, then they say whoever has the least amount of cards at the end wins. So and they just think that's great. Three and 1 is 4, and 6 is 2. And the last few. So then at the end, previously I just had them count their cards, but then this year I always learn stuff from my kids. One of my students said, Miss Martin, what if we look for 10 out of our leftovers and then count our cards? And I said, that's a great idea. So they spread out their cards, look for how many ways they can make 10 again, and then count their leftovers. And so my score would be 6, and I'm looking to get as close to 0 as possible. So that is fine 10. The next, usually the next manipulative that I introduce in my classroom after base 10 and cards is Dominoes. And I talk a lot about Dominoes because kids tend to use them a lot. I use them when I taught kindergarten. I use them when I taught third grade. I use them now that I teach second grade. And this is a jumbled up bag, but we do an anchor chart of about Dominoes because they use them, but they don't know a lot about them. And so we talk about what Dominoes are, and that a set of Dominoes is called a boneyard. There are 28 Dominoes in a boneyard. And I always tell the kids it's called a boneyard because a long time ago, Dominoes were made from animal bones. And they think that's the coolest thing ever, and they get all into it. And some of them think it's gross. And I'm like, well, they're not bones now. But, we talk about what a boneyard looks like. And I meant to bring my picture of what a boneyard looks like. But if you go onto the Canvas 3D Day course page and look in my PowerPoint, there's a picture of what a boneyard looks like. So basically what a boneyard does is it shows a pattern of the double dominoes across the bottom. And then like you have double 6 and then double 5, then 6, 5, 6, 4, 6, 3, 6, 2, 6, 1, 6, 0. And then you do the same with 5, 5, 4, 5, 3, 5, 2, 5, 1, 5, 0. And it kind of looks like a big triangle when you get finished. It looks like stairs, some of the kids say. And so I always kind of show them a boneyard, and we talk about the patterns of dominoes, and we talk about just the different things we notice and the different things we see when they're introduced. We talk about the fact that the dots on the dominoes are called pips. And so, because they think that it's a funny word, but it's a word I use in class, so they have to kind of learn it because it's kind of the same on the dice when you have dice with dots on it. So the first game that I usually teach is Domino Stack Up. This was a game that I created and developed with a kindergarten teacher for our math night last year. And what they do is each kid gets a game board template, and each kid gets one boneyard of dominoes. And before they play, I usually let them, from previous years, dominoes are always all over the place, and they're not in the right place. So the kids work through and create their own boneyard. And we talk about how to create them, and usually when they work hard to create the organization with the manipulatives, they keep them in order as best they can. So when they kind of have ownership over that once they do it. So they take one boneyard, and we talk about face up and face down with dominoes, and they pull them out of the bag, and they put them all face down. And this is not a whole boneyard, but just for example. And so they just, on their own, independently, will flip over. And for second grade, we're just trying to add up and create a sum. It's just a way to give them opportunities to derive with numbers. And so then they just start stacking. And with this game, there is no zero. And one of the things that Kristen and I worked on was we talked about how in kindergarten, towards the end of the year, which is when we worked on this game, they start working on +1, -1, +2, -2. So that's why you see it up to 14, is because for kindergarten, they can go up to 14. I also created a multiplication game board that goes through 36. It actually has 3 rows, and that's on the presentation. What do you call it?
PD3D?
Yeah, the 3D presentation board that I put that on there. So if you are in third grade and starting multiplication, this would be a great way they can multiply the pips together. 3 times 4 is 12, and then they put it on the 12 and they stack through that. So that's dominoes. And then, I'm trying to think what else. Dominoes and dice. Oh, I don't have another game to show you, but I brought the different dice that I have just to show you how many different types of dice there are. This is a great way to differentiate your games. So if you have a lot of levels in your classroom, as we all do, simple games can be created more difficult just by the choice of dice that the children use. And choice is really important. You give them the opportunity. You talk about the differences of the dice. And even if a kid who is not as developed mathematically as somebody else, even if they go get the 12-sided, they're going to soon figure out that this is too hard for them, and they will back down to the 6 because they know their own strengths. So this is just a great way to differentiate, and I think that's what we got.
And y'all ask any questions that you have, and we'll make sure and get them answered at some point. And I appreciate Ashley being willing to take the risk and take the nervousness here with us on a Facebook Live, but to do a topic that's so important, such as math manipulatives. And so if you have any resources that she used that you need, they're on the Canvas course. And thank you so much for going along the math journey with us.